You don't have to solve it, only evolve it. Sylvia Hartman. Are you curious about healing modalities, but don't know how or where to start? Which ones are real and what's just a trend? Who to trust to work with you or in your energy? Me too. I'm Cris, and this is Grounding Journey. I've been on a lifelong journey and wanted to dig into a variety of ways to heal along the way and the tools we can use to do it. So I found some neat women who use different modalities to heal themselves and those around them. I invited them to have a conversation with me where they can share about their journey, what called them to their favorite modality, and how they use their tools on their journey and the profound results they've seen. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Grounding Journey. I am so excited to have my good buddy, Dina Weiss, here with me. She is the founder of Mind Body Weight Release and is a self-proclaimed recovering emotional eater. I've known Dina since 2017 and have watched her lifelong journey of weight release ultimately reveal itself as a journey to self-love. And Dina and I have had lots of fun conversations over the years. And so it's going to be exciting to have the one today about that journey. She uses so many modalities: health coaching, emotional eating coaching, mental fitness coaching, the lifeline technique, meditation, massage, and EFT, emotional freedom techniques tapping. Dina learned that healing and empowerment distills down to energy management. After ending her own struggle with cravings, overeating, and self judgment, she's passionate about helping others do the same. And I love that she says her superpower is helping women rekindle the inner light and power so they can enjoy a healthy and harmonious relationship with food and themselves. Dina, I'm so excited to chat with you today. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, well, and as I said, we've been friends since 2017. We started working together. I actually am who built your website. And over the years, you have become a good friend of mine. You have become a friend of Matthew's. And we got to spend time together this summer in person instead of just through Zoom. So I'm excited to have you as a guest. And I normally introduce everybody as my new friend, but I can say with you that you are definitely one of my old friends. So I feel like I could answer the question I generally give people of who do your friends know you, but I'm going to let you answer it. And then if you need help, I'll help. So we've given the formal introduction. I've given my introduction of you, but who do you say you are? Who's Dina?
Wow. Maybe I will ask you to help me with that. There are so many ways I can go with that, but I'll expand on what you say. How's that?
Well, I just think that, where you said that it has been a journey to self-love, that is definitely something I've watched you evolve in, because I've watched you through retirement, prepping for retirement, coming into your own business and finding your own journey. And it's been such a joy to watch it, really watching you come into yourself.
Yeah, I think as I hear you say that, I think about how, we are all beings of love and light. And
Mhm.
sometimes that gets smoke screened out of our view. And my journey has been reconnecting with that. And so I feel like my mission is to help other women, although I have had men coming into my sphere too, but to help other people to connect with the love and light that lives inside of them, and they just don't see it.
Oh,
So
that's
I
beautiful.
feel like a conduit. I see myself as a conduit of divine love and light.
I love that. And as I mentioned, I've watched you through retirement. We watched you discover Lifeline. You're a huge Joe Dispenza fan, and you were a deep Joe Dispenza fan before I was. So you've guided me a little bit along that way of knowing and being comfortable with Joe. And so I love that. I call him Joe like he's a buddy, like you and I hang out with him on a regular basis. Um, but it's really neat to watch you use all those modalities. And I've watched you at times have struggles, but you have all these tools in your toolbox and you've really been able to use them. So let's talk for a minute, because I think that the followers and listeners are going to want to know, Where were you when you started this journey? Like, what place in life, where were your struggles? So that everybody can kind of relate and understand the past, because I'm painting this gorgeous picture of you because I see you as
Yeah.
love and light. But let's talk about where you were before that.
So the where was I think starts way back in my early childhood when I was very sensitive and just feeling other people's emotions very strongly in my own, and always had a hard time containing and managing that. And that became reflected in my eating habits, and I would eat to so that I wouldn't have to feel my emotions. And I think also I was trying to make other people responsible for my own happiness, and making my self-worth dependent on other people's thoughts and feelings. And we all have different rock bottoms. For me, weight was part of it, but also I got involved in some unhealthy relationships. And I got to a point where I felt like, there's got to be something better here. And that's where I started on a sort of a midlife crisis journey. It began with going to massage school. And I went through different studies of different healing modalities, and just took pieces from each one of them and started combining them and applying them to myself, and just finding that I was responsible for my own healing. And while it wasn't something that I could really do on my own, I really needed the support of someone else that could hold that higher vision of me that I wasn't quite ready to hold for myself. But having this toolbox now of these different techniques that help me to change my state. You mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about, change your state, you change your energy, you change your life. And everything is energy. Our thoughts are
Mhm.
energy, our emotions, our food, our language, our fat. I talk about fat being energy that's waiting to be creative energy that's waiting to be released.
I love that.
So, I feel just so passionate about wanting, makes me want to cry when I just think about it. But I do feel so passionate about wanting to share these tools with other people, because emotional suffering, we don't have to suffer. There are tools that can help us in the moment.
I appreciate your vulnerability and I appreciate your emotions to the conversation. And I think you and I have that because we have our regular catch up conversations. And so I just want to honor and say thank you for your vulnerability of saying you were in a really bad place. You were emotionally eating, you were in some rough relationships. Because we've known each other for so long, I've watched you do your work. I've built your website. So I know the content that you talk about. And just to share, for me, emotional eating sounded so foreign. It wasn't something that I dealt with when we started working together. I know my dad stress eats, but I really think he just likes to eat. So he uses stress as an excuse to eat more and like makes a joke about it. So it never seemed to me to be the emotional eating that you were talking about. And then my son went through a really, really rough summer 2 years ago. And I understood emotional eating for the first time. It was that comfort of I'm not in control. I have no idea what's going on. I have no way to make any of this better. And I put on maybe 10 pounds in 3 months.
Yeah.
So I really began to understand your purpose and your mission of how emotionally we fill ourselves that way.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that you started finding modalities because somebody else could hold the space for you until you found it for yourself. And let's talk a little bit more about that, because that journey into self-love, that journey into um, trying to figure out, I know I want this, I'm not there yet, but I'm not going to give up on it. Can you
Right.
elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few ways of looking at that community. Each time I went through a different training for a different modality, I became deeply immersed in a community where we shared our vulnerabilities with one another. And there was always love there and no judgment. And I came to see that, we are all mirrors for one another. And
Oh,
Isn't that the truth? And the things that we judge ourselves for, I mean, I would hear someone else echoing something that I was judging myself for, but yet I felt genuine love and compassion for that person. And
Yes.
I had to come to say to myself, well, if I genuinely feel that way for this person, then I have to feel that for myself. So that was a big realization.
I I have been so mirrored lately. My soul sister going through some struggles of my own, going to have conversations with her. The last time I left her house, I said I would just bring my own mirror next time so she didn't have to keep holding it up for me. But that's such a powerful thing for you to say. And it's something I think we lose in finding our self love is that we do so often have compassion for people going through the same experience as us, but we don't have the same grace and compassion for ourselves when we go through it. So that's why seeing the mirror is so important. And it also helps us to dig into where we're trying to grow.
Yes, absolutely. And these one of my mentors, my lifeline mentor, once said, our shit is our fertilizer. And it's really true. And when I look back on some of the most difficult circumstances of my life, I realized that they were actually gifts, albeit that
Mhm.
they were gifts in strange wrapping paper. But there's that empowerment piece. We see things through a lens. And when we're seeing something through a lens of love or gratitude versus through a lens of victimhood, you know, it takes on a whole new life.
Yes, it does.
It's
And
like our
and that's a
brain. I'm sorry.
go for it.
Our brain, we want to be right. Our brain is always searching to confirm what our beliefs are. So if we're looking through a certain lens, we're looking for circumstances and creating circumstances. This is all happening on a subconscious level to make ourselves right. So when we consciously start to choose a lens of looking at something as what's the gift that's either already in here or what I can create out of it for myself
It,
and for other people.
yeah, and I think what you said about um, stepping out of victimhood. Now, there are definitely situations that we are victims, and finding the healing in those experiences. But the times that we're not actually a victim, that it's just kind of switching that mindset is so important. I do you have any feedback on that? Because I know that that's something we all experience is feeling like, well, she said that to me and it hurt my feelings, or he did this to me, instead of using it as a mirror to see, oh, that this is what I need to find in that moment.
Right. Or where in my life am I doing that? That's
Yes.
another way of looking at it. But I think when people say things or do things that hurt us, I don't think that people would choose that. But, I would say 92 to 98% of um, we're run by our subconscious mind, 92 to 98% of us. That's a lot. So much is
Mhm.
happening on a subconscious level. When we experience an emotion that we don't want to experience, we're being triggered by something that is like from the past, from even in childhood, or some people might even say a past life even,
Right.
that is reminding us the situation is bringing us back to that. So what we're getting triggered about is not even necessarily as much as that particular incident, but something similar that happened a long time ago.
And I think that's something that we all lose sight of, is that it's not in this moment always. That's why it's called a trigger, because it's reflecting back somewhere else. I know that my coach that I've worked with, who's actually how we connected, and she's a fabulous coach. There, I was doing some struggles, and she said to me, well, what's your husband reflecting back at you? And at that moment, I said, nothing. The stuff that's irritating me has nothing to do with me. And at that moment, I still haven't found the reflection in that situation. But then later, there was something else he was just irritating the bejesus out of me. And I was able to see, oh, that's what I need to work on instead of it being him. So it is in that taking the pause to see, what's triggering me? It's not this moment. What is it either reflecting back for me, or what is it bringing up that hasn't been healed? And that's why I love starting the episode with, you don't have to solve it, only evolve it, because
Yeah.
you can't go back and change your circumstances. You can't change a situation. You can apologize if you did something wrong, but it's taking that and releasing it and evolving it so that it becomes a lesson instead of a victimhood.
So beautifully said.
And I think that's one of the cool things with EFT tapping. Let's talk for a second. We're going to do EFT tapping in the bonus episode, but we've mentioned lifeline technique a few times, and I think that that's something most people don't know about or haven't heard about. So let's just dig into that one for a second, and then
Okay.
we'll get into tapping, because I watched you go through all of your lifeline certification, and we've done sessions, and that was really neat because that went farther back for me. And if you're watching the video of this, you see that the cat is now the full screen. So we'll just acknowledge Elska is on the desk, because you and I are trying to have these straight faces while I'm like leaning around the cat to talk to you.
I love it.
Um, so let's talk, like I said, sorry, the cat will always distract us. Let's talk about Lifeline for a minute.
Yeah, a lifeline technique, it's so experiential that it's difficult to explain, but it's a combination of about 14 different healing modalities, such as the chakra-based system, neuro-linguistic programming, and a number of other healing modalities. And the purpose is to raise, which I talked earlier about raising your energy, to raise your consciousness, because when we are more in a conscious state, we can make choices that are more aligned with our heart's desires instead of, reacting to reactions and kind of getting on autopilot with that.
Mm-hmm. And it's a neat series of releases and tapping your body and moving through. So one of the things I love working with you about is that you have so many modalities. And most of the guests that I have had on the modalities series have this huge toolbox, and we all kind of navigate to our favorites. So that's what the episodes have been about. So would you say that right now tapping is your favorite, but at other times, other things have really benefited you at that moment?
I'd say they're all my favorites, but I would say that tapping is a little bit more at my forefront right now because I have
Mhm.
specific tools that are for emotional eating and for cravings. And so um, I've been using a lot more of that, although I still use the other tools as well.
Well, and I think that's what's neat about having a full toolbox is that we're at different points in our life and different moments in our life, and we need different things. And so if you don't always use wool socks because in the summer they wouldn't work, they'd be too hot. So you've got thin socks for the summer. So it's having these different modalities that you evolve through and you come back to, and they're always there. I know for me, meditation, crystals, yoga, there's times that I go weeks and not on my mat, but I don't get out of bed till I've meditated. So it's a neat journey to know that you have all those tools.
Yeah, I kind of see it like an art palette, and I'm a color girl. I love colors. And so each modality is like a different color on that painting palette. And so when I'm in a session, like intuitively, oh, okay, what's some of this color? And then we might bring some of this color in, like we might be maybe more EFT tapping and tapping through the points. And then I might bring in some lifeline or some other coaching modalities.
So let's talk about how you found tapping, because that is kind of the newest part of your journey, but it's not new because you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe latest part of your journey.
Yeah.
And you are who actually kind of introduced me to that. And so I've been doing some uh, tapping challenges and tapping videos, just found stuff off of YouTube. And it's amazing to me how light it makes me feel. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your journey to find tapping.
Yeah, I found tapping, oh my gosh, maybe 20 years ago when I was going through a really tough time in my life. I went to a certified practitioner and found some great benefits out of it. And then I got involved in so many other things that it kind of went by the wayside. But when COVID came around, I had to suspend my massage therapy practice. And I thought,
Mm.
maybe this is a good time to learn tapping. So I took the certification training for the EFT, emotional freedom techniques is what that stands for. And after I went through that, actually, while I was going through that, I found Brittany Watkins' work, and she's an emotional eating expert and uses tapping with specific protocols for cravings, which is different from protocols from emotional eating. And so the combination of those two trainings has just been really magnificent. It's helped me with my own, I mean, I had released some weight, but I was still having problems with cravings and emotional eating. And I found that these like tapping has made it so that I'm no longer a person who lives to eat, but I eat to live, and I really don't care. And I don't restrict myself, but I'm so much more present to what I do. And when I have those moments where I'm not, I have this tool that is available to me.
So let's talk
So,
about how you actually use it in your life, because I know when we were together for lunch over the summer, it was a Sunday afternoon. It was an all you could eat buffet. It was a fancy place that had so many different options. And I was so sad I didn't have my enzymes because I just wanted to try a little bit of everything. And you were sitting next to me, and I pushed my plate away because I could not eat anymore, and I knew I had a 6-hour drive home. You pushed your plate away and said, I can finally do that. I don't have to clean my plate. So it
yeah.
was a big moment for you, and I got to sit next to you and feel that energy come off of you of satisfaction and pride. And we pushed our plates away for different reasons. But let's talk about how you have actually implemented it into your own life.
The tapping. Well, interesting. That particular scenario, there are 7 uh, subconscious reasons why we hold on to weight, and one of those subconscious reasons is called the clean your plate club. Because
Uh-huh.
we have, some of us have programs instilled in us as a child, other people don't, but I think a lot of people my age do, because our parents came out of the Depression era. And if somehow we don't finish everything on our plate, then somehow we're hurting the starving children in Africa, or something like that. So we carry this with us on a subconscious level, and feel that we have to clean our plate. But through this work,
Mhm.
and in my doing tapping with a coach, as I was learning the work, we did a specific protocol, the tapping protocol, to eliminate that. So now I don't feel the need to eat everything on my plate. And that really did feel like a major miracle to me, because
Mhm.
it was so autopilot for me to do that. It didn't matter whether I was full or not full. I had to eat everything on my plate.
Mhm. Well, and I felt really callous when I laughed because you said there are starving children in Africa, because that was what my dad used to say to me too. So back then it was a guilt trip. Now we know the reality of it, but there definitely was that guilt trip, and I think um, there's also that element of it was survival to eat everything. So seeing that. One of the things I also want to point out is you've used tapping in your life for emotional eating for cravings because that's what resonates really strongly for you. When you were going through your certification, I was not struggling through my emotional eating at that point. Um, but I was struggling through my grandmother passing, and you needed to do a certain amount of sessions with people to kind of work through your training. So we actually worked on some of the emotions that was blocking me and struggling me with my grandmother. So you have used it, and EFT tapping is really good for things all the way around about releasing those things that trigger you.
Absolutely. And we start with an emotion, and we can take that back in time to, if you're feeling something that feels familiar from a long time ago, and we go into that. And while you tell the story about that, you're tapping on these different points on your head and your upper body. And these points are endpoints to all of the acupuncture meridians. So you're tapping on important energy points, and it really helps to relax the nervous system. And what I find, and what most people find, is when they do this, it doesn't change the memory of what happened, but it takes that negative emotional charge out of it, so that you can get more into that part of your brain where the wisdom lives, and you can see the gift in it, or
Mm.
have compassion for it, rather than be the victim of it.
I
So
love
yes, you're
that.
right.
I love that you can word it that way because it doesn't change the situation. And it's, you can't, as we said, you can't change it, but you can evolve it. You can release that emotional stagnant energy so that you can see what it was to offer you. And if it wasn't a lesson, because there are just some things that happen that aren't specific lessons, or it's not time for you to see the lesson yet, but
Hmm.
you can stop holding on to that. And I think that's really important. And as you mentioned, many of us do eat for that emotional satisfaction. But what we find as soon as we finished binge eating is that it didn't solve the emotion. It was just a momentary um, fulfillment that now we're still seeking. And then
Yeah.
there's that new guilt of, I did this. You know, I was bulimic in high school for a year. So that's what I would do is I would binge eat and then feel guilty and be bulimic about it. So um, it's definitely that there's an array of emotions that come through triggers and situations, and being able to release those triggers is a really neat thing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that it can be used for any situation. It's not just about emotional eating. And actually, the technique that I use for emotional eating, where I have someone bring like a plate of food and I have them like push it away and like, you can't have that. And what emotion comes up for you? And I go through this
Ah,
series of tapping, taking them back in time that reminds them of that emotion. But sometimes if I have a situation that's triggering me, it has nothing to do with food, or I just will just tune into what's going on, what's the emotion I'm feeling, and I'll do tapping sequences just around that. And again, it really helps to take the edge off. It's a great survival tool. Or I don't even want to say survival. I would say thrival, thriving.
mm, yes, I love that. And we're going to do a mini session in the bonus episode where we're going to do just some emotional release work. Uh, and so, one of the things I will say to people is that if you're listening to this, you're going to definitely want to go to the YouTube channel and watch the bonus episode, because you'll actually be able to see you guide me through the tapping and the tapping points so that we can kind of work through releasing that. So, where do you see tapping going? What are your plans for your future work with tapping?
I do see my tapping work primarily targeted to people, women and men too, but mainly women I seem to attract who are struggling with overeating and cravings, holding on to weight they don't want to be holding on to. And again, there are actually good reasons why we hold on to weight. There's something happening on a subconscious level that's protecting us from something that's related to love or safety and or belonging. And so the tapping really helps us get into what that is, really getting access to the subconscious mind and tapping through that to release. We store our issues in our tissues. So it
Mm.
really helps to work through that.
Well, do you mind if we dig into that for a moment? Because I feel that so many of us all, especially because it's going into the new year that this is going to be released, people are browbeating themselves over the holidays of how much they ate or what they look like or what they want to look like. So let's talk a little bit for a moment about why the emotions are connected to emotional eating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I also want to differentiate cravings from emotional eating, because with cravings, this is involving a food that it has to be a very specific food. It's hard to keep it in the house because you'll just, eat it. You drive half an hour out of your way to get it. And what's unique about cravings is that it's associated with a positive memory that you have had with a
Mm.
person. Like, maybe it was, for me, I had a brownie thing and I associated with my grandmother, and it's like the love and the connection was stuck in the food. And so the protocol with tapping that I would do would help to, in the brain, take the, out of the drawer of the food and into the drawer of the grandmother kind of a thing. Whereas emotional eating is more about, anesthetizing ourselves, medicating ourselves, avoiding emotions that don't feel good. And it doesn't have to be a specific food. Any food, it's like anything I can get my hands on, to stuff stuff down so I don't have to feel this. I don't have to feel
Mhm.
this anger, this overwhelm, the stress, whatever it is.
I've never realized, I've never made the connection between cravings being different than emotional eating, but I can completely see that because the people in my life who will remain anonymous um, crave sugar. And when I think about those two people, what I'm imagining, and this is just me making my own assumptions, so that's why they get to remain anonymous, but I'm going to have to go talk to them about it afterwards. It feels like knowing the two things that each of them craves, it probably takes them back to a happy place in childhood, just like you said, the brownies and your
Yeah.
grandmother. That
It's
makes so much
it
sense.
makes a lot of sense, and it's fascinating, Chris, because when I have people rate the intensity of their desire, like I'll have them bring the food that they crave, and I'll have them smell it and or even taste it because we really want to trigger that craving. And I
Hmm.
have people like on a scale of 0 to 10. And I remember this one man I worked with, it was pistachio ice cream, and he says it's a 15. And at the end of the session, he was at a 0, and he wanted to throw it away. I said, no, I don't want you to throw your ice cream away. This is not about denying ourselves. It's about being able to enjoy something, in reasonable quantity. So put it in your freezer and just notice over the next few days. And when we spoke the next week, he said, a couple days later, he took a couple of tablespoons and he said, that's all he really wanted. I mean, it
Mm.
really, really works. It's exciting.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such an insight that I definitely am going to have two more conversations after this just to ask and see where they can be and then send them to you. And so let's talk for a second about how we use self-image food to protect ourselves, because I think that's a trigger that tapping can really help release. And I know for me, it's not necessarily food that I use to protect myself. Mine is definitely walls and barriers. And through tapping, we worked on that. So we're discussing more of the emotional and food because I think it will help people understand and kind of have some aha moments. But if food is not your trigger, if overeating is not your trigger or emotional eating, please look at what, as you're listening, look at what you are using as your protector. So let's just talk a little bit more about the protector that we use.
Right. I mean, any kind of, addiction. And of course, when I say addiction, there's a spectrum to that. It's not like a light switch that's on or off. I mean, it can be shopping or gambling or sex or whatever else. It manifests in different forms. I think what makes the food piece more unique is that that's not something that we can totally eliminate from our lives. Like,
Right. Like gambling, we can stop that.
exactly. Or alcohol. Yeah.
How do you see people using those barriers and then releasing them?
Using, I'm sorry, say that
Just
again.
using these boundaries, using these protectors as a way. I don't know how to word my
The
question.
addictions, you mean the addictions?
Yeah, as a
Yeah.
boundary or as a, like, for me, it's a set of armor.
Yeah, I think it's happening, mainly on a subconscious level. Like I mentioned before, we get triggered by certain circumstances, and we get triggered in our senses. It could be a smell, a sound, it could be words that someone's saying that reminds us of something that we don't even remember from long ago. It could be a taste, anything sensory. It triggers us on a subconscious level, and we go into a state of reaction. When we go into a state of a reaction, there's no choice there. We go into autopilot, and then we start using these different vices to keep us from feeling what we don't want to feel, or from remembering what we don't want to remember. I mean, there's so many possible reasons, but they're all, I think, it's safe to say it's mainly happening on a subconscious level. And that's what the
Mhm.
tapping helps to get to, because you can eat the healthiest food on the planet, but if you have these um, subconscious triggers that we haven't dealt with, um, ultimately, we're going to self-soothe,
Right.
whether it's food or whether it's cigarettes or alcohol or gambling or whatever else.
Well, let's talk to, after it's been a subconscious, now it's become conscious. we're aware that we're doing it and we're aware we want to do something different. And
Mhm.
that's where tapping comes in. That's where all these different healing modalities come in, hypnotherapy. I'm trying to think of different ones we've had on the podcast. I think let's talk for a moment about the grace that we have to give ourselves once it becomes conscious so that we heal ourselves, because I think it's very easy once we become conscious of it to then beat ourselves up because we're not doing it exactly the way it's supposed to. And I know that's one of the conversations you and I have regularly about
Yeah,
having
I love
grace
that
for ourselves.
conversation.
Yeah. And, I had a friend who she challenged us to do a 30-day tapping. And I think I got to day 6 and I really was enjoying it. And then the holidays hit and I got busy and I got away from my desk and I was forgetting about it. And so let's talk about that grace that we should have for ourselves once we've
Yeah.
become conscious and we're working on the healing.
Is as you're saying that to me, I'm realizing that that's built into the setup statement in tapping. We do something called a setup statement where we'll tap on the side of our hand and we'll say, even though whatever, the perceived problem is, even though I, got out of control with whatever it is, I deeply and completely accept myself. So there's two parts to that statement. Even though this happened, I completely, deeply, and completely accept myself. I deeply, completely love myself, or I'm choosing to relax my mind and body. So we're building that into the setup statements as we tap. And that really helps to start to, release the nervous system and create a space of possibility that's more
I think that
empowering.
Yeah, I think it's so important to think about the nervous system. I know that's something in yoga that I use forward folds a lot and head below my heart so that it calms the nervous system because we're so wound up,
Yeah.
especially into the holidays after the first of the year, because now we feel the pressure of everything we have. It's a new year, the holidays are over. I think we put so much pressure on, okay, let me just get through the holidays and I'll address this in the new year. And then the new year comes and we're suddenly faced with I've got to handle all this stuff now. So our nervous system is just a wreck for months.
Right. So it can actually distill. I'm just going to show you a very simple, like tapping around. So let's just say I'm feeling guilty for overeating or whatever. It could be anything. So I'll do a setup statement, even though tapping on the side of my hand, even though I'm feeling, I'm sorry, I rate that guilt on a 0 to 10 scale of intensity. Like, let's say it's an 8 right now. Even though I'm feeling so much guilt for eating so much at Thanksgiving or whatever, I deeply and completely accept myself. And I repeat that or some version of that 3 times. And then I'll start tapping through the points. This guilt that I'm feeling. I'm feeling so much guilt from overeating. This guilt, I feel it in my chest. It feels like this big ball that just wants to explode. This guilt, this guilt, feeling it in my chest. This guilt that I'm feeling. And I just relax my arms and take a nice deep breath. And just tune back into the guilt, and I rate it again on a 0 to 10 scale. And it comes down, And so let's say, it's come down. I'd say maybe it's a 4 right now. So I'll go back to that setup statement. Even though there's some remaining guilt, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I'm still feeling some remaining guilt, I know this is not who I really am. I'll go through 3 setup statements like that. And then this remaining guilt, going through all the points again, taking another deep breath, rating it again. And I just do that over and over till it gets down to a 0. So you can take any kind of, I'm maybe oversimplifying it a little bit, but it's a way that we can work with ourselves in the moment.
I love that. And so that I think also part of it, we're releasing by tapping those meridians, but we're also taking that sacred pause. We're taking that sacred time to breathe, to calm, to get in touch. And that's so important to do, to take that sacred pause.
Yeah, absolutely. Presence. The word presence is coming to me. That's where our power
Mm,
lives, in the present moment. And taking that sacred pause is connecting with that present moment.
that's so powerful. Well, Dinah, thank you so much for this conversation. I think that so many people have heard about tapping, but don't really know what it is or how it actually works. So, hearing a little bit about your journey, hearing about how you use it working with clients, and just kind of diving into that a little bit deeper will be really beneficial to people. And I imagine that they're going to want to find you. So, where are you hanging out? Where's the best place to point people to?
Well, I would invite people to join my private Facebook group, which is called the Mind Body Weight Release Community. And mind and body, there's a little hyphen in between. So you can search me on Facebook, and I post in there almost every day. And again, it's my mission about connecting with self-love and our
Mm.
worthiness, because that's so much at the root of our overeating, is that we're looking from another source when it really lives inside of ourselves. So I really want to facilitate that self connection. And also my website is www.mind-bodyweightrelease.com.
Well, and we'll have all the links on groundingjourneypodcast.com so that they can find you if they're driving and can't write it down right now. Or they can reach out on Instagram and private message me, and I'll send them their info. So thank you so much, Dinah, for your time today. Thank you
Thank you,
so much for
Cris.
your
I always love
friendship.
hanging out with you.
I know it's so much fun. And we're going to do our bonus episode. So I encourage people, if they want to actually see the tapping happen, you, of course, can listen to it as a podcast, but I would definitely encourage people to go to the YouTube channel, which is Grounding Journey on YouTube. So you can actually see the tapping points and where we're going to be tapping. So thanks again, Dinah, so much for your time. I
Thank you,
always
Cris.
love chatting, and I can't wait to do our bonus episode with you.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening today. I would love for you to join in on the conversation by following me on Instagram at grounding_journey. That's where I get to connect with you and other women like us. I'll see you there.